Church in Monroe, Arkansas. I will be presenting to you a short sermon entitled, This is How I Fight My Battles. Today I'll be using the verses from 1 Samuel 17, 32 through 33, and 48 and 50. There is many ways to fight our battles. Today I'm going to give you 3 ways that I hope you will be able to use to fight your battles. The first point I want you to remember for today is you are tiny, but God is mighty. See, we know how the story of David and Goliath goes. Goliath comes every day mocking the Israelites, but the Israelites were terrified. One day, David, a shepherd boy, went to the battlefield just to give his brother some food. But then he heard Goliath mocking, and he saw how the Israelites were terrified, so he went to Saul. And here's what he said to Saul in 1 Samuel 17, 32 through 33. Let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go fight with this Philistine. And then Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine because you are but a youth, and he has been a man of war from his youth. See, David knew he had enough faith in God that God would give him the strength to fight this enemy, to fight this giant, no matter what situation you're in. God will give you the power to fight your enemies. But you also must have the appropriate armor when you go out to battle, right? See, in 1 Samuel 17, 38 through 39, we see that Saul clothed David with his armor. David said to Saul, I cannot walk in these, for I have not tested them. King Saul told David he could fight this Philistine, as long as he wore his earthly armor, his metal. What King Saul did not know and did not see is that David already had his armor on. He had the armor of God. But wait, what is the armor of God? Well, the armor of God is the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the gospel of peace, the helmet of salvation, the shield of faith, and the sword of the Spirit. We need to put this armor on every day to keep us protected from anything the enemy would throw at us. This armor is not something we hang on the shelf and grab when we think we need it. It's something we keep on day and night. Because if you take it off, you will get hurt. You will give in temptation, and you will be defeated by the enemy. But once you have your armor on, you must face your enemy. The third thing I want you to remember for today is don't run from your enemies, face them. See, when Goliath saw David, he mocked him. This would have been a great time for David to call it quits. Like, yeah, he's right. He's so much taller than me. He's so much stronger than me. I'm just asking to die. Think about it. Goliath was 9 foot, 9 inches tall. Goliath basically could squash David with his foot. It would have been easy for David to do what the crowd was doing. He could have trembled in fear. He could have ran back home to his little daddy. But that is not what David did. It says in 1 Samuel 17, 48 and 50, it says, when the Philistine arose and came near to meet David, David hurried and ran towards the battle line to meet the Philistine. Just like David, we need to run. We need to run towards our enemies, not back down. You must take action with the power of the Holy Spirit. Don't let your enemies scare you. Remember, every power on this earth is subject to the power of the Holy Spirit. In verse 50, David had a mighty victory. It says, David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and with a stone. When you have the armor of God on, you will prevail. You will prevail over every giant in your life. A great testimony to remember was on February 29th, 1948. Pastor Richard Wurmbrand was abducted by communists. And during that time, he was beaten. He was put in prison for 14 years, but he still prayed. His wife was put into a concentration camp, and his son was orphaned. But even though all this had happened to him, he stayed faithful to God. One day after a beating, the guard looked into Pastor Richard's cell, and he was praying. See, the guard opened the door and he asked Pastor Richard how he could pray even though all these bad things had happened to him. Richard, I am praying for you. Just like Pastor Richard, we don't need to run away from the problems. We don't need to hide from the persecution. No! We need to run to the battle, clothed fully with the armor of God. Because even though we're small, our God is the one who fights our battles. Amen. That is how I fight my battles, and I hope you will too.